Leonardo Gabrielli. So thank you for coming. I hope I'm not getting you sleepy. I know it's been a long conference, and it's been a really great conference. I would like to thank the organizers, especially Alessandro, Laura, Anthony. They've done a really good job. They've been working 24 hours a day. So I want to express all my gratitude. And I'm really honored to be here. I actually don't deserve to be here, but I'm glad I am here to report on some information that is been, say, missing. And it's been, this talk is going to be sort of a historical tour in our region, in the musical industrial district. But I don't want to, I will present the agenda of this in a little while. I have to give you a few information about me and Acousmatic Matme Association that I am representing at this point. So I've been researching about network music performance. That was my PhD topic at Università Politecnica, delle Marche. And then I started working on deep learning for physical modeling. So I'm more of a DSP guy, but I've always been in touch with the computer music community, and I'm really, which I like a lot to be at computer music conferences rather than technical conferences. The environment is much more rich and intriguing for me. By the way, I'm not a C-sounder in a strict sense, but my first computer music language was C-sound, and that was thanks to Eugenio, who introduced me to that language when I was a kid, actually. I was still in high school, and I was attending some lectures in Pesaro Conservatory. So yeah, I'm more working on the DSP side of things, but I like to see how computer music languages evolve. And recently I started adventuring in VCV Rack, which is a sort of platform for building virtual modular synthesizers. And I'm writing a book about that. Dr. B has had, I don't know if it was a pleasure to read it, but he had the chance to go through that, to the draft. Thank you. Yeah, thank you, I appreciate. So, yeah, I'm moving into virtual analog stuff in the last years. Talking about analog stuff, there's a non-profit organization which is Acousmatic Matme, which has been founded in Ancona a few years ago. That was, it started from me and Paolo Bragaia, who will be here today downstairs after the talks, and a couple other guys, Riccardo Pietroni, Agostino Maria Ticino. It started with a festival which is called Acousmatic. It's more on, let's say, IDM music mostly, but there's a lot of contamination with contemporary music. We had several times contemporary music concerts and electroacoustic stuff, acousmatic stuff, a lot of very different things. So we are trying to bring the whole electronic scene to this small region, and we have to, try to get it 360. Then there's a new project that we started 1 year ago in Macerata, which is still in this region, which is the Italian Synth Museum. which is a sort of a crazy idea. A few years ago, when Paolo started with this whole idea of, you know, preserving Italian synthesizers, I was sort of, you know, well, okay. But then with time, I discovered that that was a great idea, because we live in a place that's full of history about making electronic musical instruments. And it turned out to be a very, very interesting journey through our history. By the way, also maybe a history of people we know, because most of the people that's been working on this industry, they were like neighbors. I even had a grandfather who was creating plastic reeds in the 60s for melodicas. So I found out a lot of things, and I want to share a bit with you now. So I'll move on. I'll try to be a bit more quick, because I see that I am going a bit too slow, and there's a lot of things that we can tell after the lectures in the foyer of the theater. We have this small exhibition. It's sort of like 1/5 of all the instruments we have, but we wanted to put up a few pieces here so you can see, and we can talk later. So my talk will be, I'll talk about historical introduction starting from the 19th century, and then go to a thing that might be of interest for you all, that's part of computer music. Well, let's say that's the computer music part of our heritage. So our region is mainly crops. You see, we have a lot of hills. So mainly based, our economical heritage is mainly based on agriculture. But we also have some historical highlights, like in Loreto. Like, see, this is Cagli. Here's Ancona, where's one of the airports, and this is Loreto. Loreto had a basilica, very nice one actually, and there's a lot of pilgrims that go there and went there. Allegedly, there's the house of Mary, which was brought there by angels flying. So that's the story, and this house is inside the basilica. The whole basilica was built around it. So there was a pilgrim in 1863. He was traveling to Loreto for his pilgrimage. At that point, very close to, well, I might take a little detour from this, and I would say that he should go there, not to Loreto. That's very near. Yeah, I'm not supported by travel agencies, but I should say that that's a nicer place to be. Though, but yeah, so he was going to Loreto, and in a rainy night, he needed some shelter, and he was very close to Loreto. He was in Castelfidardo. The legend tells that he was given shelter by farmers in Castelfidardo, and in this family of farmers there was a kid named Paolo Soprani, and during the night he managed to, well, this pilgrim had an accordion with him, and the guy, this kid, in the night managed to disassemble the accordion, learn how it was built, and when the pilgrim went away, in the subsequent years, he started building accordions. That's an account of the story. Somebody else says that he was donated this accordion, and then he learned how to produce accordions. That's maybe more close to truth. But we don't know. Anyway, in 1863, Paolo Soprani built his first accordion, and from there, whole business of accordion makers started in this small town, Castelfidardo, which at the time was a town of farmers. No industrial facilities there at the time. So that was the first factory he built there. So with time he grew his business, and he had a lot of workers. He even built houses for the workers around. So that's how the town grew up with time. It's a factory, but still a lot of craftsmanship. So no, so yeah, the workers are really artisans. And that's how it goes nowadays anyway. So there's no automation in these factories nowadays. It's still tens of very small businesses. But he was the first one. So at the turn of the century, in the 19th century, there were brothers, cousins, neighbors. They all started this thing, building accordions or parts of the accordions. And Castelfidardo is still known worldwide for this. Each year they have a festival, and hundreds of people from abroad come for this festival. So there's a very strong tradition with accordions. But then we are moving a bit forward in the analog electronics days. After World War II, there was, the music market changed, and every house had electricity, so they wanted to listen to music and to play some instrument. And at the time, a lot of instruments were sold for houses all around the world, like the mellotron, for instance. It was thought for house uses. So a lot of companies moved from accordions to keyboard instruments or other appliances like turntables and this kind of stuff. I just want to show you with a little video, just very short, how these, let me see. It's in Italian, I hadn't time to translate, but I want to show you the images. That was one factory, the Farfisa factory. You can see how many people were employed there in the, I think this is in the end of the 60s. A lot of people producing, at the time, electronic instruments. So, yeah, you see there's a lot of workers, specialized workers there. And at the time, of course, they had some R&D facilities, which I'll show you in a minute. Let's see. That's a picture from, yeah. That's two of the key persons at the time. One was a musician and the other one was an engineer. They have quite an interesting facility for the time. So at the time, as I said, there was a revolution in this industry. A lot of companies would move from accordions to electronic instruments, not only, also guitars, amplifiers, all this kind of stuff that were popular in the for the beat generation. And in the 60s and the 70s, a lot of popular instruments got out of our region and sold worldwide. Like the Farfisa organs, they were used, for instance, by Pink Floyd. It's very small here, but there's a compact duo here. That's the Amagama cover, but also in the Pompeii, Alive in Pompeii, you can see it. And then there's this strange thing here I will talk about later. Jean-Michel Jarre, and then Klaus Schulze playing a string machine. El Rhapsody string machine. Of course, some of them were not so popular, like this one. It's sort of a strange machine. I wanted to put it here because it's sort of funny nowadays. It sounds like a chiptune rhythm box in a way, but at the time nobody had a clue how to use it. But nowadays it's fancy. And then that's one keystone. The Echo Computer Rhythm, it was the first programmable drum machine in history, programmable through a 16-step sequencer. And also, so you can see here all the switches and the lights, but also using punch cards. So on the top, I will show you in a moment how it worked. And it had 6 instruments, actually 12, so, but anyway, 6 sequencers, and for each one you would activate or deactivate a step as well, all of us probably are very much used nowadays using sequencers. So. But at the time it was something new. So it was in 72. These two guys, Aldo Paci and Giuseppe Censori, they actually invented it without even knowing how this would, in a few years, become the de facto standard in at least electronic EDM, electronic dance music. Yeah, I'll show you a little video about this. That's something you won't find on the internet. It's a trailer of a documentary that's been work in progress, and Paolo has started this thing. I had to translate it and prepare some subtitles, but I didn't have time. Anyway, these are the designers of this thing, the developers. Actually, Paolo had an important role in this because he found this drum machine. There's a few units in the whole world nowadays. And he also managed to get in contact with these guys, and they didn't have a clue that they invented the first programmable drum machine. So the first one was the circuit designer. This other guy was more mechanical and design developer for the thing. And we also had them interviewed a couple of times, and they didn't even remember that they did it in the 70s. Then after a while they say, yeah, remember this thing with the orange buttons, and then the whole story came out to light again, and they figured out that it was brought to Frankfurt Music Messe in 73, and then there was a lot of interest, and a lot of Japanese guys were there, you know, taking pictures of it. So, yeah, I'll try to be quick. So, after a while, the idea was back into the market. A few years later, the Roland CompuRhythm came out. It was, there's nothing, I mean, just the name, Computer Rhythm and CompuRhythm. But then, later they did this drum machine, which is the, you know, it changed everything in the disco and EDM music production, and it had a 16-step sequencer. And at this point, everyone was at ease with this kind of thing, but not because the Echo Computer Rhythm was popular. I mean, that didn't sell anything. I mean, it was just maybe 20 pieces produced, something like that, because at the time it was so big and expensive, and yeah, so bad timing, too early for that. But then later this would be fashionable for people. Here I have a table. On the paper you will find a lot of information about the companies. This is just a table with the most popular names in our area. Most of these companies were started a little before or a little after Second World War, and they were all from the surroundings of where I live. Osimo, Potenza Picena, Castelfidardo, Recanati, Camerano, Recanati, all these kind of places around, very small towns. And one thing that I should say at this point is that most of these ended in the 80s. Some are still active, some changed it a bit, but many stopped production in the 80s. Why? And I didn't add those companies that were not in Le Marche, but a bit out, but still quite close. There was the digital switch. At that point, these companies had a lot of very well-trained technicians. They came from electrical high school, so they were very good with analog circuits. Even some early digital circuits, but they were not trained as engineers, and they had they didn't study what was going on abroad. So they were very good in doing analog stuff, but then when the whole world moved to digital electronics, they couldn't really catch up with this. With some exceptions, I mean, I will tell you, like some digital products were made. I mean, like this one, the Wilson syntax, it was based on digital electronics. I presented a paper at DAFEX this year about how the circuits are, how it produces its waveforms, and it's based on the Walsh-Hadamard transform, which is a very nice mathematical transform, and you can easily implement that with digital circuits. But one issue with this, the developers didn't even know what was the Walsh-Hadamard transform. I had an interview with one of them, so they were just, working a bit with their creativity, but that it's not enough sometimes. Another thing, fancy, syntax again. Elka syntax, that's another machine, 1981, that was a project from Mario Maggi, another famous developer of synthesizer. And it's based on a DAC. As you can see, there's a whole bunch of comparators. So it's a sort of DAC made with discrete electronics, and it's quite ingenious actually. So it's a polysynthesizer, this one. And the entire panel is digitally controlled, and it uses D-type flip-flops to control all the electronics. It has presets, so you need this. And it has digital controlled oscillators, as I said. There's a lot of debate on the internet about the nature of these oscillators. Some people say they are numerical oscillators, which is actually false because there's a DAC, but there's no microcomputer to control the numbers that go into that DAC. So it's not really a DAC, and I wouldn't call it a digital oscillator. It's just a DCO. It's digitally controlled. And then there's this project from Krumar. That's a polyphonic synthesizer, and at this point they had MIDI built in within the project, and it was designed by Krumar, the company, and developed partly by ICSC, which is an institute. I will tell you a bit more in a few minutes. And then there's this sampler as well. This was developed a bit later. and it didn't really go into production. So one of the pieces you'll find downstairs, and that's a pre-production prototype that I've got. And this was, again, developed by Krumar and Iselqui. So what was Iselqui? This was an institute for partly owned by the region, and it was meant to sustain and to support the development of new knowledge in the engineering of electronic devices. So it was meant to support our industry. All our small, medium enterprises, SMEs, that had to, you know, renew their departments, to keep ahead, try to still innovate. As I said, these technicians that were working in the companies couldn't go above what they studied at high school, and the engineering department of the University of Ancona was still in its early stages. It's rather new. It was started in '69. So this Iselqui was meant to help the company develop new products. It had a role in research, so it even helped organizing a conference. That's the Colloquio di Informatica Musicale, it's a computer music community in Italy, and they had a conference in Ancona. So that's the prefaction of the proceedings. And they say, we decided to host it in Ancona because there's lots of production of musical instruments, and the university has competencies in the field of signal processing. But then these Iselqui things stopped in the 90s for several reasons, which I will not go into the details now. What's the time? Okay. Another interesting story is about SEAL, which later became Roland Europe. So this started as, let's say, a spin-off. I don't think, like 4 former employees of Farfisa, they started this company, and they did manage to get into digital electronics. So they had the know-how to produce digital instruments. And at some point in '88, they were acquired by Roland, and they became Roland Europe. And the peak, they had 200 employees, which is a lot. Then in 2013, in spite of good financial outlook, Roland decided to shut this down. But fortunately, another company acquired it, and now they are a few engineers are still there working with a new firm that's called Decibel. So what now? Where are we with this? As I said, in the 80s, the digital technologies and the low manufacturing prices that were mainly due to the Far East competitors, they made a lot of these small family-owned companies shut down. The accordion instruments didn't suffer this, because nobody back then, but even now, can compete with the strong craftsmanship that the accordion industry has. The nice thing is that several companies survived, and other ones were started later. So a few examples. In '95, Korg Italy was started as an R&D lab. And now they are leader in the arrangers market segment, which is probably, arrangers are not so interesting instruments in a way, but they have a terrific know-how in music theory, because these machines are able to arrange and help the musician to arrange music in real time. So there's a lot of expertise there. Then in the early 90s, Viscount opened an R&D lab, and Eugenio is still part of this story. which is now fully integrated with Viscount, which is a company not far from here. And they are currently the first musical instrument manufacturer to adopt deep learning for sound design. And that's been part of our work at the university to support them with research. Sound Machines was started in 2013 as a spin-off of an electronic design company. They worked in other market areas, but now they produce synthesizers and synthesizers modules in the Eurorack format. You've seen the brain interface that was used by Dr. Richard Boulanger yesterday. That's one of their first modules, and they've been hired by IK Multimedia to design the Unosynth and Unodrum, which are very nice machines. So there's still a lot of know-how in this area, and as you may recall, if you followed a bit the social medias, Behringer was attempting to create a new R&D facility in Ancona. I think this whole thing stopped just because they found out that the bureaucracy was too much. That's what they told me. They even came visiting our university, but then they moved elsewhere where bureaucracy doesn't steal all your time. But that's, you know, that's our problem. So we are the first region in terms of GDP in the musical instrument manufacturing, and the second one in the digital audio, right after Lombardy. So we are still doing our good things, and yeah, I'm proud of this, and I think we can do even better. So how do you survive in these issues? You have to keep in mind that a lot of problems in our world arise from being obsolete. And so you have to do R&D investments, always. You also have to be good in marketing, because sometimes people just sell crap, but they market it nicely, so you sell it and then you have money to continue sustaining R&D cycles. And you also have to design a product in a holistic approach, taking usability, design reliability, affordability into considerations. I mean, these are probably quite, I'm not telling you anything new, but that's at a certain point the management of these companies didn't know. So what happened to the rest of the crowd? All these companies that were shut down. Nowadays, there are pieces of hardware and documentation that are either in the hands of collectors, like we are trying to do, or lost in the garbage. And we'll never get that back. Some historical facilities have been converted or even demolished. Farfisa, then IKEA. I mean, it's really bad. All these people that were working there, there was a great social life in that company, and nowadays there's a furniture supermarket. Some others are still abandoned, like this one. So that's the second part of this talk. It's going to start from here. I don't know why they put a bed here, actually. That was a factory, but probably workers did sleep there. I don't know. But anyway, that's part of a company which was Bontempi. They are actually much more famous for, or infamous, for musical toys. But they, at a certain point in the 80s, they acquired Farfisa as a brand and also its facilities, and they continue to produce and develop arranger keyboards in the line of the Farfisa stuff. Well, that's not so interesting for you probably at this point. What's interesting about this story is that the Bontempi had started a research institute. This is Paolo Bontempi, which was the owner of the company, and that's the factory that I showed you, so the abandoned factory. These photos we found in that abandoned factory and a lot of other stuff. We discovered a lot of material, historical material, documents, pictures, and hardware stuff. And this is mainly due to luck, because at a certain point in January this year, one of our friends told, you know, they are selling away all the crap that's inside the Bontempi factory in Potenza Picena. And we said, well, let's go there and see if we can find something interesting. And we found something interesting, but at this point, we need economical resources. And Riccardo was a pillar in this, because he managed to arrange with the, you know, the guy who was selling away all this stuff, a price, and get a lot of things that I will tell you about. And then craze, because you have to be crazy about going into an abandoned factory and try to get things that nobody cares about, like abandoned computers from the 90s, and see what's inside these machines. But that was a very nice idea, because we discovered a lot of things from the Iris Center. This is a picture from this center, and that picture was one of the things we found out and salvaged from the abandoned factory. IRIS was the acronym for Istituto di Ricerca per l'Industria dello Spettacolo, and it was founded by Bontempi in Paliano, Frosinone, which is, let's say, close to Rome. This is Paliano, and that's Rome. So a bit far from here, still in the center of Italy, but a bit far from here. So why did Bontempi establish a research center in the, it's almost in the south of Italy? That's probably because of development funds that the government gives for developing southern areas. But we still have no documentation in this. The main goal of this institute was research. I would say pure research, because that's what they did, even though the goal of this venture was that they would later engineer next generation Bontempi instruments and products. So that's other pictures of the people working at this place. The team was composed of academic researchers and engineers. And Giuseppe Di Giugno was invited to lead the group in 1988. And he left his place at IRCAM to join and continue the development of ASIC processors, which he had done in the years. So why? I'm still wondering why he left IRCAM for coming back to Italy with all the issues you have working in Italy sometimes. But we'll ask him on the 25th of October at the Synth Museum, where we'll have a conference with him. So, just a few notes about him. Many of you will know more than I know, but I wanted to just recap a few things, especially those related to the technical stuff. So, he was a physicist. He is a physicist. He's still alive. He has worked in the field of nuclear physics at the CERN and at the Naples University. He was a professor there. But in '71, he met Robert Moog at Cornell University, and he decided to get into the field of computer music. And in '74, he met Luciano Berio at IRCAM, and he was enlightened at this point. He thought about a processor for real-time processing. In '75, he completed the development of the 4A, which was the first processor able to synthesize 256 oscillator, or I guess sine oscillators in real time. And he went on with this project at IRCAM, where he was invited by Berio, and he started developing further generation of the 4 processor, culminating in the 4X. By the way, that's a paper from ICMC 1981. tells something about this processor. It's sort of a DSP, microprogrammable DSP, and it was oriented for real-time synthesis, analysis, live sound processing, and it was used by Boulez and many other composers. He was always oriented towards real-time performance, and in a call with Sylviane Sapir, which was working at IRIS, she recalls that Jean-Claude Risset, during a visit in Padua, he agreed that the platform, it's 4i at this time, was going to be the perfect trade union between real-time improvisation and offline composition. And there was a bit of a struggle between Risset and Di Giugno about this point. So, the IRIS Center was located in this beautiful park. It was really a great place to be, probably, for people. They had a lot of space, very quiet area, so sort of a relaxing place where they could develop research and then engineering. Well, maybe not so quiet at some point. It doesn't seem so relaxed in this picture here, but, you know, it was a very cool place to be. So what they developed was the Mars workstation, a workstation based on the X20 processor, which was the, say, the children of Di Giugno 4X processor. From the meeting minutes we found, it seems that the X20 was already available by 1990. And in that year, they also had the first Mars board, the SM1000, under development in France at ITIS, which is an electronic development company. I think, but I'm not sure, but I should still, the research work is in progress, so I'm not sure at this point. But probably this company they did the development in France because Di Giugno just left IRCAM, so he already had very strong collaborations there. So the product specification were for a workstation, but the term was blurry and subject to continuous discussion between the IRIS team, which was, you know, more research-oriented, and the Bontempi management. In '89, they wanted to have a musical keyboard with a display and then also an expander for computer music, but specifications are very blurry. And in 1990, the keyboard idea was dropped, and they were more into a research platform that would be presented at Musikmesse Frankfurt in '92. So the acronym for MARS is Music Audio Research Station. Actually, that's the hardware. You see, that's one of the first boards they developed. The terms stands for Musical Audio Research Station, or March 92, Mars, March, or even Mars, God of War. War against the Japanese, because probably still they wanted to, you know, fight the competitors in Japan. So that's one of the pictures of this machine, of this system. It's a hardware with two X20 DSPs in a 19 inches rack with analog and digital I/O, MIDI. The firmware was RT20, which was stemming from Sylviane Sapir's work at the CSC in Padova. She has developed for the 4i. The software was a graphical editor, at first for Atari and in the later years for IBM PC. And the target of this thing were research centers, composers, and advanced recording studios, or even famous artists. Like that's what they write in their meeting minutes. Peter Gabriel, Stevie Wonder. So like, probably something alternative to synclavier or these kind of things. And we know that there's been a few users, not too many, at least composers. It's been used for performances. It was oriented towards real-time performance. So no, as far as we know, and as far as Sylvian Sapir recalls, there's no acousmatic piece for this. I've been told about Perseo and Andromeda by Sciarrino, and several pieces by Nono that's been, say, ported to this platform. I know that there's a guy who's called Jochen Bones. He's not much into contemporary music. And then I know Walter Prati, but there's many more, and we still have to, you know, collect a catalog of compositions for this system. So I'll go into the software platform, which is very interesting. That's a screen. That's a picture from the Atari version of it. But I'll show you later. Okay, I think I'm running out of time. So that's the starting screen for the PC version of it. The taxonomy of the system is quite interesting. There's 4 levels: the algorithm, the tone, the orchestra, and the tone map. The algorithm, well, it's an algorithm. There's a GUI for developing this, and they even had, so it's a patching system, and they had physical modeling objects. Like this is a model of a clarinet, and it's very nice. We are speaking about the early 90s. And I tried it a bit, and it's amazing how this system works. It's very user-friendly. There's a lot of little tips that allow you creating things quickly in an easy way, and also it's very complex, especially for the handling of the parameters. So the algorithm is the base, and then over that you have a tone, which is the collection of all the parameters like envelopes, parameters, LFOs, and for these you have a lot of easy configurable dialogues, especially what I like for, that's very cool for physical modeling. It's the parameters where you can create dynamic mapping using mathematical laws. So you have a lot of building blocks based on these relations. So you have a nonlinear function with an offset and a multiplier, and you can combine these in several ways. Like here you have 1 plus n2, which is the second line, multiplied by my m1. And you have MIDI stuff, MIDI CC, velocity, and the keyboard note to control these things. You have a lot of flexibilities, a lot of LFO shapes, and the envelopes, you could do anything. And there's also physical values if you want, so you can have a very physical meaning of the system you're trying to model. Then there's the orchestra, which is actually mainly a routing screen. You have your audio inputs and outputs. You place your algorithms there. You decide how many instances of the algorithm, so you decide basically the polyphony. And you have processor A, which is the first DSP, and processor B, which is the second one. You can cascade the audio from the first to the second. Like here, there's a clarinet model with polyphony 4 that's getting out in the DAX of the first processor, but also chained to the second processor, where you have an enhancer and the reverb in insert, and then you get the outputs from that. And then there's the tone map, which maps MIDI channels to algorithms. So you basically, you can have your sound layers arranged. You can recall your instruments by using program chains. And one very important feature is that it allows multi-timbral parts. I mean, you can have one algorithm with different sets of parameters. So you can have the same algorithm produce different tones, so you can have different sets of parameters work with the same algorithm to produce different voices with different timbre. So yeah, I won't focus very much on this because I'm running out of time, but the building blocks for the algorithms are extremely interesting. And then later I have a virtual machine here of this software. I can run it and show you what kind of building blocks we have. So the physical modeling part is very interesting, but there's a lot of spectral transformers, additive synthesis stuff, analysis resynthesis, a lot of things. Yeah, one thing that's important to mention that this system, as far as I know at this point, has no score. So you do everything, well, you have to compose outside of this machine. So everything must be sequenced through another system and send as MIDI messages to this one, which probably, I think that this may be related to how this project started. It had to go, after a few years, into a keyboard for the Bontempi company, not go too much in the direction of composing in academic institutes. So I want to conclude this. What happened next? The Iris developed two further custom ASICs based on the X20, which are here shown. This was still one thing that we found in the factory, in the abandoned factory. And it's great to have it here because it helps us to reconstruct the history. The K22 and N22. I know that this, from the docs, I know that this went to a Bontempi instrument. I don't know about the N22. And then there was a second line of processors, smaller ones, scaled down versions that were thought for low-end musical instruments. And I think that these were developed by another team, but I still have to discover that. Then in '99 they ceased the research activities. The Bontempi continued for a few years, but not too many. A part of the company is still there, existing, but they mainly do trading of instruments produced in China. Unfortunately, the Mars was adopted by few research centers, unlike the Kima Capybara system, which at the time, it came a bit later, but it was adopted much more widely. And I know from Sylviane that the choice of using Atari and then PC was a bit of a, say, European versus US thing, because in the US they asked a lot to port this system to Macintosh, but they were not used to have Macintosh, so they decided to go to PC. But then the whole things changed with the obsolescence of these kind of platforms, the rise of personal computers and so on, as you all know. So nowadays you can do everything with your laptop with C-Sound, and that's it. You don't have to carry on all that hardware stuff. So just in conclusion of this, I want to say that history teaches us a lot of lessons, and we want to dig further into history to collect things, get more, complex framework to understand what happened to our industry, what happened also in the computer music world, and with their projects. And we'll have a conference in a month dedicated to this, and we want to, write down things and report and share with you. So I think that we'll be able to tell a lot more after this will happen. Yeah, so I'm done with this, and I'm glad you didn't sleep too much, and I'll be here with my friends downstairs for the whole afternoon and afternoon with these machines, and we'll have to talk a lot about this. So, thank you.